Once again, this is Mike McClanahan, and I worked with him, I guess, a little over 2 years, 2.5 years, give or take. Learned a lot from him, sat in a lot of meetings with him. He's got a lot of experience, fun guy to be around in general. So I hope everyone enjoys him. I think he'll be beneficial to listen to for everyone. We can learn something from him. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and let Mike have the floor here.
Thanks, Nathan. Thanks for inviting me. It's great to see everybody, or not see everybody, depending on who else listening in online. Just a little about my background. So I owned a company and we did management and leadership training around the world and management consulting. I sold that company for profit, thank goodness. But I learned a lot, not only running my own company, but working with other companies. And there's my personal opinion, there's a myth that large corporations must be really good because they're so large. In reality, they have the same issues that small companies have, just they can hide them better because they're so massive. But I thought I'd go through just some specific things that I learned. Doing business consulting, did it a long time, and whenever you go into an organization, you would do a gap analysis. So you would go to the senior leadership of the company and you would say, what's the greatest asset you have in your company? And they would always say the same thing. What do you think that was? The people. People are your greatest asset. So then you go to the people who are actually doing the work and you ask, so what's the biggest problem here at your organization? What do you think they would say? That's the second thing they would say. First thing they would say is communication, always. Communication. Now, for years, I always thought they just didn't want to say, well, my boss is a jerk, so, they would say communication. But what I found out is communication really is a problem, because if you think about it in today's world, especially in business, what is the primary way you communicate today in business? Anyone guess? Sorry? Online. Email. Now, when I first started doing training, it was email. But what is it now? It's email and text, right? So when your primary method of communicating is email and text, you don't get the tone, you don't get the body language, you don't get any of those things. So have you ever had somebody text you, or have you ever texted somebody and they send you like, are you okay? Are you mad at me? That's because the tone, all those things get lost. But in business, being able to communicate, actually you have to be able to do more than communicate. You have to be able to connect in business. And that's a more important skill than just communicating. You have to be able to connect. So for my training, I have a couple of things. You might want to write these down. They might be important to you. So there are 5 basic traits to a connected communicator, somebody who really knows how to connect with people. And the first one is, you have to be open-minded. Most companies will tell you they have an open door policy, but if you have a closed mind, the open door doesn't do you any good. So they're having an open mind, allowing people to express themselves. The second thing is being sincere. In politics they say if you can fake authenticity, you have it made, but being sincere is important. Being authentic, be honest. The third one I think is the most interesting, and it's being direct. So in our culture, we have taken being direct as a negative. It is not necessarily a negative. It all depends on the delivery. But people appreciate it when you're direct, because you're going to get to the point. Get to the point. And the fourth thing is be respectful. Accept what other people have to say. Doesn't mean you have to agree, but accept what other people have to say. And then lastly, be interested. Good things happen when you're interested in what other people have to say. We have a tendency in a conversation, as opposed to actually listening, most of the time we're just waiting for our turn to talk. So being interested in what people really have to say can help you in being a more connected communicator. So here's 5 more. These are the 5 skills of being a connected communicator. This is one that most people fail on. Organize your thoughts before you speak. We just have a tendency to blurt things out there. And if you want to see how good you are or not so good at this, leave a voice message for yourself and go back and listen to it. See how that sounds. So organize your thoughts before you speak. Secondly, seek to understand what the purpose of the other person is. If somebody's speaking to you, what's their purpose? If you're speaking to them, what's their purpose in listening to you? 3, we're going to repeat this one again. Get to the point. Clarity is important. The 4th one is, what is the benefit of the person that you're talking to? What is the benefit for them for listening to you? What's in it for them? And lastly, ask questions. Ask a lot of questions. Good things happen when you ask questions. It also shows that you're interested in what's going on. Now, I know this class is about entrepreneurship. If you're trying to sell your idea, if you're trying to work with vendors, if you're going to lead a team, you have to be able to connect with people. You have to be able to connect with people. So professionals who are able to connect, they generally ask themselves these 3 questions. And I think whatever interaction you're going into, you should ask yourself these 3 questions. Why should people connect with me? What's special about me? Why should people connect with me? The second one is, can somebody else imitate what I do? And maybe the most important question is, when someone needs what I have to offer, will they think of me first? Or will they think of me second? And it would be terrible if they didn't think of you at all. Okay. In order to be a professional communicator, connector, people have to perceive you as having credibility. So if you approach an investor, an angel, a company, and you want them to buy your idea, what makes you credible? Now, you can buy credibility, or you can earn credibility. Think about what is going to provide you that credibility. Is it education? Is it experience? What's going to provide that credibility for you? And if your idea or your product or your solution is going to create change, the one thing people hate most is change, and changing the environment. And I don't mean the environment, I mean your working environment. So how do you deal with the fears of the people when it comes to change? How are you going to communicate to them why this is important? Now, the key to being a transformational leader is influence. That also pairs with your credibility. Credibility equals influence. Now, in order to do anything, sell your idea, sell your product, work with your vendors, lead a team. By the way, leadership, anybody can slap a tag on you that says boss. That does not make you the leader. You have to volunteer to be the leader. Just because you're the boss doesn't make you the leader. I'm sure you've been in situations where, whether it's on a sports team, whether it's in some other endeavor, you have the person who's in charge, and then sometimes you have the person that you go to actually find out what's going on. That's the leader. They don't have time. So to be a leader, you really have to sign up for that. But anyway, so how do you build excellent relationships? And this goes along with leadership. First thing is trust. If people don't trust you, you're dead right from the beginning. People have to trust you. And I'm going to give you a phrase that I would recommend you not use it outside of school. Creative abrasion. Basically what that means, people have to trust you so you can create an environment where there can be some abrasion that's creative so that you can be honest with one another. Secondly, reason. Can you reason together? You may not agree, but can you reason together? And third, maintaining your focus you're constantly going to have distractions, whether it be people or obstacles or whatever. Being able to stay focused on what your prime objective is. And be visible. If you want to have your own business, you want to sell an idea to an existing business, but you want to run it, go to the Chamber of Commerce meetings. This community is unique because I've been to Chamber of Commerce meetings all over the country. In this community, you actually have decision makers who go to the business after hours meetings. You actually have people there that can make decisions. Lots of other places, it's salespeople swapping business cards. Here, you actually can connect with people who can make a decision. So go to the Chamber of Commerce meetings. Yeah, in today's world, the Rotary clubs and all these things are losing their way, but be involved in community activities. That's really where you make contacts. It also helps gain your credibility. The real problem with leaders who change the world, people don't like them because they kind of like the world the way it is, especially if it benefits them. So if you have an idea or if you have a service or product that is really going to change things, you're going to be met with skepticism. People don't like them and they don't want to deal with people who make big changes. An example, it takes 17 days. If you move your trash can from one side of your desk to the other, it takes 17 days to get into the habit of throwing that trash away on the other side of your desk. If that takes 17 days, making fundamental changes, how long does that take? So you have to know how to kind of keep the pressure on, and the credibility there is even more important. Okay. I would also, what you will find in lots of organizations is they have what I call rear view mirror. The way they look at things is through the rear view mirror. There's a reason why the rear view mirror is this big and the windshield is this big. You'll hear stories about, well, back in the good old days, or way back when, this is what we used to do, or how great it was. Resist buying into those rear view mirror. It's important to know some of those things, but moving forward and constantly thinking forward is really going to be the best for you in whatever organization you're trying to work with. Okay. If you are going to be transformational in whatever your idea is, the first thing, well, one of the things I would encourage you to do for yourself and the people you work with is kill the myth of perfection. If you're waiting for something to be perfect before you roll it out, it may never happen. It may never happen. So kill the myth of perfection. You're going to learn more after you roll something out and see how it goes. You're going to learn far more from that than trying to make the perfect thing first. But you have to be able to make room for a change and manage it. So know that it's not going to be perfect, but manage whatever the change or whatever the issue is going to be. I think this is very, very important. In my business career, I have discovered there are basically three types of people. There are the task-driven people. Those are the transactional people. Here's the thing, we're going to do the thing, I'm going to give it back to you. Transactional people. Then you have the goal-level people. The list writers. How many of you are list writers who make lists? Okay, so those are the goal-driven people, the list writers. But in my experience, the happiest and most productive people are the purpose-driven people. And I'll tell you where this really stood out for me. People who are able to emphasize purpose and separate that from the function of what they do. So the function is, you have to come here every day, or whenever you come, how many days. You have to be here at a certain time. You have to do what you're doing right now. You're writing things down. Those are the functions. And oftentimes in business, we get so wrapped up in the function that we lose sight of what the purpose is. This was really driven home to me. My company, we were based in Washington, D.C., so we did a lot of work with government contractors. And one of our clients was the Department of Homeland Security. And I was doing a training session with their contractors, and we were talking about this, and I said, so what's the functionality of your job? Well, have to fight the traffic, and we have to get to work, and I have to fight with the boss, the government, and we have all these things. Functionality. So if you don't do your job, what's the worst thing that can happen? Well, people can die. It's the worst thing that can happen. So that is the purpose. So oftentimes we get hung up on the function that we lose sight of what the purpose is. If you stay focused on what the purpose is, all of those annoyances that come with the function are not nearly as important. So those people were able to leave that day saying, if I don't keep focused on the purpose of what my job is, which is to keep people from dying, all those other things don't really make that much difference. So keep focused on the purpose. The team you're working with, keep them focused on the purpose. It's really, really important. Okay? Anybody have anything you want to add? Any questions? Anything you'd like to ask before we go further?
I like just like
Sure.
here with the purpose, keeping the purpose
Yeah.
in mind there. I think that goes hand in hand, just even as an entrepreneur, because 9 times out of 10 we talk a lot in this class about having a passion or a desire to want to actually do something or bring something to the market. So I think that kind of relates right to that purpose. If you keep your focus on that passion, on the purpose of what you're actually trying to create or evolve or bring to market, I think that will ultimately bring you success at a much higher rate than just focusing on, like you said, making it perfect or whatever. Just focus on the actual purpose of what you're doing, and in turn, it will actually make it a better product and more successful because you're focused on what drives you and what your desires are and what your overall purpose is.
Perfection is a myth. And if you stay focused, the purpose is really, at the end of the day, you're going to find lots of obstacles that are going to be thrown in your way, regardless of what you're trying to do. There are going to be obstacles. There are going to be people that are going to tell you, you are crazy. Why are you trying? Go get a job. I mean, that's what everybody, go get a job. People are going to throw obstacles in your way, but if you stay focused on your purpose, now, you may change the purpose, but if you stay focused on it, that keeps you on the right track. Something I'm going to talk about is attitude. Have you ever worked with or been involved in a project with people who are really, really smart, but they're just so negative about everything? They walk around with a black cloud over their head, and when they interact with you, they leave a little bit of that black cloud with you as they leave. No matter how good somebody may be at their job, if they don't have the right attitude is everything. Most people, there was a study done, every year at Harvard, they do this thing with CEOs, and they do this exercise. I won't do it with you today, we could have, but maybe we'll do it another time. They do this exercise with what are the qualities and characteristics of the perfect employee? And then you go through and you make the list, and then you label them, are they skills, attitude, or both? And every year they get the same result. 85% of what comes out of that exercise, 85% of what's important to those people are attitude-based. Skill is only 15%. So if you have the right attitude, it can mean, would you rather work with somebody who knows everything, but you hate to see them every day because they're such a downer? Or how about that person that maybe they're not quite there, but they're anxious and willing to learn, and have the right attitude? So attitude is everything. Attitude is everything. Let me ask you this. What do you think is the most important thing to an NBA basketball player? Athleticism. Okay. Heart. Okay. Anybody else?
Education.
Sorry?
Dedication.
Dedication. Well, I'm going to disappoint all of you. It's money. NBA players don't strike over athleticism. They strike over money. Okay? Money is important. However, interesting statistic. Teams win 70% more games at home than they do on the road. Theoretically, the court is the same, the officials are the same. So why do they win more games at home than they do away? We call it what? The home advantage. Right. They sleep in their own bed. They're in their town. They're familiar. They know where the dead spots are on the floor. All those things. So my question for you if you currently have a job, or when you have a job, or when you have your own company, or when you market your idea, what's your attitude look like? How's your attitude? I tell managers this all the time. When you pull up in front of your place of business and you walk in, there are always going to be fires burning. Are you throwing gasoline on those fires, or are you throwing sand on those fires? If you're throwing gasoline on those fires, people do not want to deal with you. No matter how much they may like you, they don't want to deal with you. So I just encourage you, no matter what you're doing, if you're working on a project, if you're going to your job, if you're coming here to class, you're throwing gasoline on the fire, or you're throwing sand on the fire. That will benefit you. Your attitude and how you deal with that will benefit you a lot as you move forward in whatever endeavor that you're going to try to accomplish. Okay. So I have one more little story that I'm going to share with you. Does anybody have any questions? Anything to share? Anything, I don't know, out there?
We always hear the saying, if you think you can or you think you can't, or if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Yeah.
So then there's a lot of attitude where if your mindset is right, really you can do anything you want to do. If
Well-
your mindset is wrong, you can't accomplish anything, but
You know, it's interesting. I left this out, but I'll go back to it. When I was talking about the professional and credibility, one of the things that was in my notes is professionals don't say, can I do whatever it is? They put one little word in front of it. It's how can I do whatever it is? Because the people who say, can I do, they give up when they run into the first little problem. People who say, how can I do? Well, they're open to a lot more ideas. They're open to a lot more interpretation. So just something to think about. Other questions, comments, anything? Okay. So I'm going to tell you this little story. I work for a very large organization. And there was one division in the organization that everybody wanted to work for because of the boss. And the reason you wanted to work for him was because when you worked in his department, that was the fast track to promotions other places in the company. But he was an interesting guy. His name was Neil. He was an interesting guy. So you go in and you talk with Neil. He was a very unassuming guy. Most people think about leaders or people who run companies or run large divisions, that there are these charismatic people. He was not. Very low-key, very understated, but everybody liked him because he would say, he was what we would call a contagious leader. A contagious leader says, here's the task, here's the budget, here's the timeline. I want you to make sure you can get it done. It's up to you to do it, as long as it's legal and ethical. Here's what you can do. A contained leader is someone who says, okay, here's the task, and I'm going to micromanage you every step of the way on how we do it. So Neil was a contagious leader. Here's what it is, here's what I want you to do. And because people didn't want to disappoint him, they would put in the extra effort to make it happen. So one particular project, he's going on a second honeymoon. This big project comes up, and he says, well, maybe I should stay. Everybody on the team says, no, you should go. Well, if you think I should go. So he does. Project comes in, everything is great. So every year we would have these huge meetings, Orlando, Las Vegas, and there would be awards. And most division heads, when they would win an award, or the division would win an award, the division leader would get up and he would say, my team, and because my team, and I led my team. And it was Neil, when we would win awards, would say, I want one of you to get up and accept it. So, of course, you would get up to accept the award, and what was the first thing you would say? I want to thank Neil for being such a great boss. I want to thank Neil for being such a great leader. So, which had more credibility? If Neil had gotten up and told everybody how great he was, or if he sent somebody from his team up there and they talked about how great he was. So my hope for all of you is that one day you'll be able either to work with somebody like Neil, or even better, you'll have somebody standing in front of a room like this talking about you the same way that I'm talking about Neil. If you can do that, you're going to have smooth sailing in anything you want to do. Just remember, when you're working with people, take more of the blame and less of the credit, and they'll do anything you want. Okay? That's it. That's all I got. Throw money, no applause. Just throw money. Any questions? Anything I can answer? Anything you want me to follow up on, Nathan?
What kind of advice would you have for, as a manager,
Yeah.
if you want to walk a fine line of running not being strict with making sure they're doing their job, doing it well, and then also being an understanding individual?
Well, this is one of the hardest things in business, and I call it the A word. Anybody want to take a guess what the A word is? Careful. Accountability. You can do that, and you can be a benevolent leader as long as everyone understands they're going to be held accountable for the results. So that doesn't mean, we have gotten out of this in the workplace, which I think is a positive thing, but a lot of companies, a lot of organizations still look at the time you put in. So I like to think that the productivity that you have is more important than the time you put in. If you're working 70 hours a week and you're not able to get your job done, I don't think that's commendable. I think you're probably not very good at your job. So knowing you're going to hold people accountable, knowing that you're going to hold them accountable. So you can be a benevolent leader. You can be, my opinion, 8 to 5 is antiquated myth. There are lots of people who do better work at night, at home, whatever. Productivity should be the marker, not necessarily time in. But you have to hold people accountable. That's the key thing. They have to know this is what's expected of them, and you can be friends, and you can be pals, but at the end of the day, this is what has to happen. Did that answer your question? Okay. Anything else?
You want to be a business owner, or you just settle into it? Or?
Well, I knew that I didn't like working for other people. Even though I'm doing that now. But I guess I kind of stumbled into it. I spent a career before that in media, radio, television, newspapers. And I kind of fell into my business because I was doing a presentation to a bunch of media people about advertising. And there just happened to be a lady there from the Washington Speakers Bureau. And she said, I think I can get you some gigs. I said, great. And then I ended up buying a business where we did management and leadership training all over the world. And I sold it. And I still have clients that call me. So I kind of fell into it, but I always knew that I wanted to do my own thing. I always wanted to do my own thing. But I did learn a lot along the way by working for other people. That's important. That's important too.
I have a question. What do you think, as far as your process of walking into your job as consulting and everything, what do you think were your biggest trials, or really just your biggest tasks at hand in trying to bring it to a bigger level or maintain the level that it was at when you bought into it?
Since you're interested in being entrepreneurs, the biggest struggle I ever had, especially consulting, you walk into a company, and it's a lot like marriage counseling. Okay, in counseling, in therapy, they teach you, the first skill they teach you is, if you're doing marriage counseling, you set the couple down on the couch and you say, okay, Nathan, what's your name? I want you to tell her what's your issue, how you're feeling, and you'll start with, and you're not going to respond. And Nathan, you would say, well, I'm feeling, and then at some point you would say, well, that's not, I would say, no, you gotta let him get it. You gotta let him get it all out. And then I would say, so what did you hear? And generally, what they hear is not close to what the problem is. But anyway, so then you reverse the roles. Going into a consulting situation, it's very similar because, as in life, it's always easier looking from the outside in to pick out the problems than it is when you're there day to day. But the largest problem that I had as a consultant was convincing the CEO that they needed to make these changes, because as a rule, they feel like they know everything. They're the smartest people in the world. And sometimes they are, most of the time they're not, but they think they are. So convincing them they need to make these changes. So I would always tell them, here's the way this process is going to work. We're going to go through the analysis, and I'm going to come back to you with these recommendations. And you can implement all of them, which would probably be the best. You can implement some of them, or you don't have to implement any of them. Either way, I'm going to get paid, and when I leave, it's still going to be your problem, okay? That's the biggest problem. Convincing them that they don't have the grip on their organization that they think they have. Did that answer your question? I feel like I said a lot. I don't know if I answered your question. Any other questions?
Do you have any advice on maintaining as far as relationships you in the workplace, about being like hard disciplined worker, nonstop working, and then balancing that with, talking with your coworkers, socializing throughout the day, how to balance that process?
Again, I think it goes back to productivity. Nathan and I used to socialize a lot when we worked together, but it all went back to productivity. Are we getting the things done that need to be done in the time frame that they need to be done in? That's the thing. So I don't, all of these antiquated business models, time, nose to the grindstone, and all that stuff. Hard work is important, and people who work hard are important. But generally, what I find is, even when people look like they're working hard, they're generally not working that hard. They're just looking hard. So I think it's better to have an open, honest situation where it's, look, this is due by the end of the month. You can do it over the next 2 weeks, or you can wait and do it all the last day. But at the end of the month, it has to be done. I tend to think that's better. Now, people are different, so you have to manage them differently. One size doesn't fit all. You have to know your people.
I got one other thing. It's not really a question, but I just want to point out what I thought was most interesting, and I think is also most true, is the attitude. I think attitude is by far the most important thing. And I think it was you who used to tell me, you can't teach attitude.
Cannot.
You either have it or you don't. And it was you that told me that, And so he said that, and this was when I was even coming on board, it's just, some people have the attitude and some people don't have that attitude. And so he said he would take someone with the attitude every day, because at the end of the day, the person with the attitude is going to do, like he said, they're not going to say, well, can I get this done? They're going to say, how can I get it done? Because they got the attitude that no matter what, they're going to persevere. They're going to get the job done, no matter if they have to be out there all day, 2 days in a row, whatever it might be. So I just want to say that I totally agree and think that's so true, that the attitude is so very important.
Here's the key thing. You can always teach skill. It's impossible to teach attitude. So if you have the person with the right attitude, you can teach them the skill. Hiring a bad attitude and then trying to teach them the skill, impossible. So the attitude is far more important. I encourage people when they interview prospective employees that they ask attitude-based questions. The questions we ask primarily come off of what? A resume or an application. Those are all skill-based. I'll tell you my favorite attitude question. I used this today. You know the question, right? Did I ask you that question?
The last one you asked, right?
Oh, yes. So usually the last one I ask. If we were to offer you a job, what's the one thing I need to know about you now that I'm going to find out about you 6 months from now if I hire you? And I've had a lot of interesting answers to that question. But that's an attitude-based question. That's an attitude-based question.
And that's a great question to just look in some of these people's faces. Because I've had the pleasure of sitting in on some interviews with him. And great, he can conduct a great interview too, by the way. Great at that. But it's funny when he pops that question on some people. It's almost like come on away from the chair on there saying, oh gosh, I don't know what to say.
Well, and the important thing is to leave the awkward pause there, because that's your friend. Don't fill in the silence, just leave it hanging out there. And I usually get, sometimes I get, I can't think of anything bad. Well, it doesn't have to be something bad. You're just assuming it has to be something bad. It doesn't have to be bad. So ask attitude-based questions. You'll find much more out You'll find out much more about the person by asking attitude-based questions.
And plus,
That's a skill.
go ahead.
So that's it.
Plus, dealing with attitude as well, with attitude questions in the interview process. A lot of times you want to know what people's attitudes are and what their personalities are as well, because it's just as important to have a good working environment. If you want to make sure that people get along while they're working together, because that in turn relates directly to productivity. Because if you got people in a group that hate each other, then they're not going to come together to try to work on anything together. And they're going to shoot other people's ideas down, even if they agree with them, just because the person they don't like came up with it. So I think that can lead directly into setting the tone, within the organization, making sure the attitudes don't clash.
You need to be sure that the people you're attempting to bring in your organization understand the culture of your organization, and that they're able to fit in. And the thing about ideas are like children. No matter how bad they are, we like ours best, okay? So keep that in mind. If you want buy-in from people, you have to be willing to listen to their ideas. Doesn't mean you have to accept them, but you have to be willing to listen. Okay? Anything else?
Well, thank you, Mike.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me. Thanks, Nathan. Glad to see you got a real job. Thank you. Let me know if you need anything.
All right. Well, that's it, everybody. All right. Thanks, Mike.
See ya.
All right. See you, Mike.
Bye, everybody.
So what did everyone think about that? Good? You enjoyed them?
Yeah.
So interesting guy to listen to talk to, right? You learn a lot from him. I learned a lot from him myself, just sitting here, and I've had a lot of one-on-one time with him and sitting in meetings and stuff. But he's definitely a great guy. He's very knowledgeable. He knows business in and out. And I thought he'd be a great person to bring in. I hope that you all enjoyed his presentation and everything. And honestly, hearing him talk about the little employee trade thing, I might bring him back in later in the semester, depending on whether I get the slots filled on the Fridays or not. Maybe we'll sit down and play that little thing. I'll run that by him. So, but everyone overall enjoyed it. Had a good time. Did you like having someone from the outside come in and talk a little bit instead of me just standing up here and boring everybody?
Good.
It's good.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, I appreciate everyone coming, and everyone have a good weekend. So,
I'm gonna have to steal that interview question whenever
all right, I'm telling you. And on this, I'll say this before I stop recording. I'm not gonna have anyone write a reflection paper on the speech. However, I might ask something on the final in regards to it. So obviously the lecture will be recorded and posted in Moodle. That way, if you need to go back and listen to it a little bit before, but I don't want to bog you all down every time there's a speaker in here. I will sometimes have you all write a reflection paper, but overall, I just want y'all to have the experience of actually sitting and getting to listen to it and stuff. So just wanted to point that out. It is fair game for the final, but no reflection paper necessary. So. And I hope everyone has a good weekend. Thanks again, everybody.